Yeah, well, let me first of all welcome everybody on behalf of the Russian International Affairs Council. I think it's a very timely and an important discussion that we are going to have today. I hope that it will be a blunt and candid discussion of very serious problems that we can observe in the Sahel region and further down in Africa. And let me say that, in my opinion, we should probably focus our deliberations today on three major aspects. First of all, our assessments of developments in Sahel and in Central Africa. To what extent the assessments coming from Russia and from Europe coincide, overlap, or diverge? I think it's an important issue of how we look at long-term trends and also how we evaluate the impact of some global developments on the situation in this part of the world, namely the climate change and migrations by the climate change, also the impact of the pandemic and the economic recession on this part of Africa, and of course the processes of deglobalization, how they can affect the countries of the region. We see a rise of Islamic fundamentalism in some of the places, but again, I think that assessments differ. Some take more optimistic views on what might happen in this part of the world. The years to come, some tend to be more alarmist. The second set of issues is the role of outside players. And again, I think that we might diverge in our understanding of this role. Some believe that this role is critical, and when we are talking about Sahel in particular, of course, the French role is quite exceptional. Others would say that external players have really quite limited impact on the fundamental developments in the region. We can become a part of the problem if we interfere in this region with our bare hands, disrupting local balances and introducing more instability. Some would say that external assistance is still very important for countries of the region, and definitely this is something that should be maintained and maybe expanded. And finally, the last, but definitely not the least, I think we should touch upon opportunities of cooperation between Russia and the European Union, Russia and the Fifth Republic in this region. If not cooperation, at least some kind of coordination of actions in order not to create additional problems caused by the geopolitical competition between Russia and the West. I think that to the extent possible, we should try to somehow segregate, insulate this part of the world from the geopolitical competition. I understand that it is difficult. Some would say that it is not even possible, but nevertheless, I would suggest that we discuss these issues as well. Let me also say that I do believe that it is the first, but definitely not the last event that we conduct with our partners from France and other European countries. I think that there is a clear deficit of communication between Russia and Europe on African issues. We need more discussions, we need more interaction in order to get more clarity about our respective positions vis-à-vis Africa. And on behalf of the Russian International Affairs Council, I would like to assure you that we will keep this part of the world on our radar screen. We will continue working on these issues, and I hope that we will be in a position to do it together with our European partners. Once again, thank you for attending this event, and I'm looking to a productive, open, and hopefully intellectually rewarding communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kortunov. My name is Côme Carpentier, and I have been with Mr. Noé, who is here with me, a facilitator of this initial event, which we hope will lead to a number of other fruitful exchanges, both in oral form as well as in papers. So we are going to start today with an overview of some of the major problems and issues confronting, in particular, France, more broadly Europe, in the region of Africa that we are looking at. And hopefully that would lead to a further reflection on what can be done to help solve some of the problems which are in fact becoming more and more acute, and which are leading to increasing debate about whether there should be more intervention in Africa or there should be less. One thing that we also should point out is that in this particular dialogue, we have mostly Russian and we have in fact only Russian and West European participants, but this is opening a door to bring in further inputs from local African thinkers and strategists as well. I thought it was first useful to have a meeting of minds between Russians and West Europeans on the problems that are being faced there with a certain detachment from local issues which people from those regions may not always have. They may look at things in a much more polarized way. So perhaps this would be a useful way to start an objective and open-minded debate. Now, we have a little problem with Ambassador Berg, who is just about to join us, but since he's not online yet, perhaps, yes. So could we ask Colonel Ogar to start, or what is, because Ambassador Berg was supposed to give his talk now, but I think he needs another 5-10 minutes. So should we ask instead Colonel Ogar to give his talk? The reason being that Colonel Ogar prefers to speak in French, and I will translate pretty much sentence by sentence. So perhaps we should do that, if you all agree.
Thank you, dear friend. I'm pleased to contribute to this seminar this morning. And I give my greetings to all Russian and European, West European participants. I will speak in French. It will be easier for me because I have no enough time to prepare it in English, sorry. I would like to present myself first, very quickly, and then talk about the relationship between France and African countries. Mon rapport personnel avec l'Afrique est très ancien puisque je suis le fils d'un officier français. J'ai vécu enfant et jeune adolescent en Afrique, au Sénégal, en Mauritanie, à Djibouti. Par la suite, j'ai servi en tant qu'officier de l'armée française dans un certain nombre de pays africains. Djibouti toujours, qui a compté beaucoup pour moi dans ma carrière, et également, bien sûr, au Tchad, en République centrafricaine et au Congo.
If you don't mind, let me translate. Colonel Ogar has introduced himself saying that as a child and a young man, he spent time in Africa because of his father, who was a military officer like he is, and in fact all his family for a few generations. And he was, among others, in Senegal, in Mauritania, and Djibouti. Then he served as a military officer in a number of African countries, Djibouti again.
Djibouti, Tchad, Centrafrique, Somalie, Rwanda, bien sûr, au moment du terrible génocide de 94.
And also, of course, in Rwanda at the time of the frightening genocide that took place in 1994, but also in other countries, including Somalia.
J'ai retrouvé l'Afrique comme entrepreneur civil à partir de 2000.
From 2000, I sort of returned to Africa as a civilian entrepreneur and business leader.
Les pays concernés, c'est la Côte d'Ivoire, la Centrafrique, le Gabon, le Congo-Brazzaville, le Niger, la Mauritanie, le Maroc, etc.
I will not give the names of the countries because I think you have recognized them. They are most of the countries of Central and Western Africa.
Je voudrais parler ce matin des relations franco-africaines.
And I would like to speak today about the Franco-African relations.
Et d'abord, je voudrais dire qu'elles sont très anciennes, puisqu'elles débutent pratiquement avec la création de la Compagnie du Cap-Vert et du Sénégal sous le roi Louis XIV en 1626.
Franco-African relations began in 1626 with the Company of the Green Capo Verde and Senegal under the rule of Louis XIII.
En 1783, le traité de Versailles accordera officiellement le Sénégal à la France.
And in 1783, the Treaty of Versailles officially gave Senegal to France.
C'est le début de liens historiques qui ne cesseront de se développer tout au long du 19e et du 20e siècle, notamment au travers de la conquête coloniale.
Then these historical links were developed and further, mainly through the colonial conquest throughout the 19th and 20th centuries.
Le coup d'envoi est donné par la prise d'Alger en 1830 par le roi Charles X.
And it's in 1830 that King Charles X took Algiers, which was in fact the door to all of Central and North and Central Africa.
Cette expansion coloniale donnera un véritable empire à la France, l'Afrique du Nord, bien sûr, l'Afrique occidentale française, AOF, et l'Afrique équatoriale française, AEF.
And it's through these conquests that France became an imperial lord of most of Africa, North Africa, West, and Central Africa.
Si l'on ajoute la République démocratique du Congo d'aujourd'hui, qui est le premier pays francophone au monde avec 80 millions d'habitants,
and if we add the African Republic of Congo today, which is the largest French-speaking country in the world with 80 million people,
si l'on ajoute les royaumes interlacustres qui vont devenir le Rwanda et le Burundi,
and the Lake Kingdoms, which became Rwanda and Burundi,
et à l'extrémité orientale du continent, dans la Corne de l'Afrique, le territoire de Djibouti,
and at the Horn of Africa, the territory of Djibouti,
et bien sûr Madagascar dans l'océan Indien,
and of course Madagascar and the islands of the Indian Ocean.
C'est une surface considérable sur laquelle un nombre considérable d'êtres humains parlent français.
So it's a huge area which is French-speaking for the most part.
13 millions de kilomètres carrés en 1939.
In 1939, it amounted to 13 million square kilometers.
Aujourd'hui, la francophonie, c'est-à-dire l'espace où le français est parlé, c'est 300 millions d'habitants estimés dans le monde.
And so today we are looking at about 300 million French-speaking people in the world.
Les mots-clés dans les relations franco-africaines, à mon sens, les mots-clés sont les suivants. The keywords for the friendship and relationship between France and Africa are the following one. Colonization, francophonie, the two war conflicts,
The two
World War, First World War and Second World War, the independence, and especially the constitution of states, artificial states with approximative frontiers.
Yeah, the borders were defined very arbitrarily.
Borders. And the last term, but not the least, l'aide au développement, the help to development, French African cooperation, and the bad word France-Afrique.
Yeah, France-Africa has become a bad word in a way, fraught with certain evil connotations.
The French-African summits, and the last word, immigration. Each of these words are heavy of sense. They have all an important role in the matter which rule the relationships today between France and Africa. Alors, je voudrais dire souvent passionné, parfois passionnel. Ces relations.
These relations are passionate and sometimes quite fraught with, I would say, yes, passions in that sense, in both senses, both love and hate.
Ces relations soulignent quand même l'importance des liens entre la France et l'Afrique.
However, the connections between France and Africa and this part of Africa are extremely strong.
Quelles sont les raisons, à mon sens, je parle sous mon propre contrôle, de leur détérioration actuelle?
What are the reasons for their current deterioration?
Premièrement, je voudrais parler de l'opinion publique africaine.
First, I speak about African public opinion.
Et les reproches faits à la France.
And the griefs that are being imputed to France by the African populations.
Pour une frange considérable de l'opinion publique africaine, à tort ou à raison, c'est la France qui est rendue responsable des perturbations que connurent l'essentiel de ses anciennes colonies ou pays assimilés, je pense au Rwanda en particulier, dans les années 80 et 90.
For most Africans, France is held responsible, rightly or wrongly, for most of the trouble and conflicts that have taken place in African French-speaking territories, whether former colonies or affiliated states such as Rwanda and Burundi.
80s and 90s.
In the 80s and 90s, yes.
Ce jugement de l'homme de la rue africain est en partie vrai, mais en partie faux.
And this is both right and wrong as far as the assessment is concerned.
Vrai, quand il s'agit de la déstabilisation du colonel Kadhafi en Libye en 2011.
One very key factor is the destabilization and the overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi's government in Libya in 2011. That was indeed a very disruptive event.
C'est à l'origine de la déstabilisation actuelle du Sahel.
And this created destabilization throughout the Sahelian region.
Mais aussi d'une partie de l'Afrique centrale et jusqu'au golfe de Guinée.
And that led all the way to trouble to the Gulf of Guinea, so throughout Central Africa as well.
Il y a 3 jours encore en Côte d'Ivoire, une attaque terroriste islamiste s'est déroulée dans le nord du pays, à Tehini.
3 days ago, in the north of Ivory Coast, a terrorist attack took place.
C'est vrai également quand la France intervient entre 2013 et 2016, mais pour quel bénéfice en Centrafrique?
It's also true when France intervened militarily between 2013 and 2016 in Central Africa without any clear purpose or outcome.
La raison est que nous n'avions pas d'objectif politique et stratégique.
Because France had no strategic or political objective.
C'est faux, en revanche, quand on parle du génocide au Rwanda en 1994.
However, it is wrong to impute responsibility to France for the Rwandan genocide in 1994.
Ce drame épouvantable, la France n'en est pas responsable.
And I have been able to prove that France was not responsible for this terrible drama.
Mais il est bien davantage imputable aux Rwandais eux-mêmes, bien sûr.
The responsibility lies primarily with the Rwandans themselves.
Notamment au chef de guerre et véritable stratège qu'est Paul Kagame.
And in particular to the warlord who was a strategist of much of this operation, who is Paul Kagame.
Mais aussi aux puissances anglo-saxonnes.
But there is also a responsibility lying with the Anglo-Saxon powers.
En particulier à l'administration démocrate des États-Unis d'Amérique,
And in particular, the democratic administration of the USA.
Clinton, Albright, ce sont des noms qui reviendront d'ailleurs avec insistance quelques années plus tard au Kosovo lors de l'opération menée par l'OTAN pour détruire définitivement la Yougoslavie.
Well, the same administration, in other words, the Clinton administration and the Secretary of State Madeleine Albright are also coming up in the context of the operation led by NATO, which broke Kosovo from Yugoslavia and created further disruption in Europe.
Leur responsabilité est grande dans la déstabilisation de la région des Grands Lacs, où se livre encore aujourd'hui une guerre féroce pour le contrôle des fabuleuses richesses du sous-sol des provinces orientales de la RDC d'aujourd'hui.
They still bear responsibility for the ongoing troubles that are taking place in the Western and the African Lake region, primarily intended to take control of the enormous natural resources that lie on the east of the Republic of Congo.
Eh bien, malgré ça, la France, tout est fait dans les opinions publiques, et même en France d'ailleurs, pour que la France soit mise au banc des accusés.
However, many moves are being made to place France on the, you might say, as an accused party for what happened in Rwanda.
Alors, ce n'est pas innocent. Le complexe du Rwanda qui a été inoculé aux dirigeants français provoquera dans les années qui suivent une déshérence grave de la politique africaine de la France.
And this has not been without consequences, because the fact that France was essentially made to atone for what happened in Rwanda led to a very major collapse in the French policies towards Africa.
On le verra par exemple en Côte d'Ivoire dans le milieu des années 2000.
And this is visible in Ivory Coast in the middle of in 2005, 2000. I mean, in the middle of the first decade of the 2000 decade.
En résumé, on peut dire que si on a eu dans le temps une politique paternaliste, voire néocolonialiste, c'était le cas sous Jacques Foccart au moment le Monsieur Afrique du général de Gaulle. Aujourd'hui, nous n'avons plus de politique africaine.
So it can be said that while French policies towards Africa were paternalistic and colonial under General de Gaulle through Jacques Foccart, who was known as Mr. Africa, nowadays there is no real French policy towards Africa.
Deuxième facteur, il faut bien sûr prendre en compte les évolutions sociologiques.
And we have to take into account the sociological evolution as well.
En particulier le changement de génération en Afrique.
The change of generation in Africa in particular.
Les trentenaires, les cadras, rêvent souvent d'une autre forme de partenariat aujourd'hui, plus égalitaire, plus décomplexé.
And the people who are less than, say, 40 years old in Africa are now asking for a different kind of relationship with France, more egalitarian and less loaded with complexes.
La mondialisation, la digitalisation sont des facteurs, je dirais, vulgarisant cette évolution des mentalités.
And this evolution in the mindsets is being facilitated by digitalization and globalization, both economically and technologically.
Troisième facteur, les erreurs politiques commises.
And the third factor are the political mistakes.
Nous avons été maladroits dans la gestion psychologique de cette relation passionnée ou passionnelle, amour ou désamour.
France has not been able to handle well this relationship, which is fraught with both positive and negative emotions. And therefore, it has dilapidated a lot of its, you might say, moral capital in Africa.
Par exemple, la dissolution du ministère de la Coopération en 1999 et son intégration dans le ministère des Affaires étrangères n'a pas été compris au départ par les Africains.
Well, in 1999, when the Ministry of Cooperation was dissolved and brought within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, many Africans did not understand this and felt that France was essentially renouncing its responsibilities.
Withdrawing.
Withdrawing.
Alors, l'appellation actuelle du ministère des Affaires étrangères français, qui est ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères, traduit bien ce tropisme ouest-européen, que je regrette personnellement, et un apparent désamour de l'Afrique de la part des autorités françaises.
And the fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is now called Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs implies that there is a certain amount of disconnection from Africa with an almost inclusive focus on Europe.
Autre erreur, la subordination de l'Agence française de développement, créée par le général de Gaulle, au ministère de l'économie.
Another mistake was the fact that the Agency for Cooperation, created by de Gaulle, was put under the authority of the Ministry of the Economy in France.
Pourtant, l'AFD a un poids très, très important, c'est 12 milliards d'euros en 2020.
In 2020, the budget was 20 billion euros.
Dernier point, la politique des visas et la politique d'octroi des bourses d'études qui est pratiquement inexistante ou très maladroite.
And nowadays, the policy for visas and for scholarships is either non-existent or very poorly handled.
Tout ceci crée des fortes et tenaces rancœurs, en particulier chez les jeunes Africains.
And this creates a very, long-living disappointments among the young Africans.
Dernier point, la posture des dirigeants, des présidents français.
And last point, the attitude of the French political leaders.
On peut parler de Mitterrand et du discours de la Baule en 1990.
Referring to Mitterrand and his speech at La Baule in 1990.
Cette volonté d'imposer la démocratisation comme condition préalable de l'aide au développement.
That will to impose democratization as a sine qua non condition for developmental aid.
Or, je ne suis pas persuadé que la démocratisation soit une caractéristique propre aux Africains.
And it is true that democratization in that Western sense is not particularly suited or well understood by Africans.
Ensuite, la perception par les Africains de nos présidents successifs.
And then the fact that our successive presidents have been perceived in Africa in very particular ways.
Si M. Chirac aimait l'Afrique ou était perçu comme aimant l'Afrique,
while Mr. Chirac was seen as the person who really loved Africa,
ce n'est pas le cas de M. Sarkozy.
It wasn't so for Mr. Sarkozy,
qui a entamé son mandat par un discours catastrophique à Dakar le 26 juillet 2007.
And who gave a rather disastrous speech in Dakar in 2007 at the initiation of his mandate.
Un discours considéré comme arrogant et humiliant, méprisant.
It was considered arrogant and rather contemptuous of Africa.
Par ailleurs, Sarkozy, pour les Africains, c'est l'homme qui a renversé Kadhafi et qui a renversé Gbagbo en Côte d'Ivoire.
So for Africans, Sarkozy was the man who overthrew Gaddafi and who overthrew Gbagbo in Ivory Coast.
La grande affaire africaine de François Hollande, c'est le Mali, de janvier 2013 à juillet 2014.
And in Mali, from 2013-2014, Mali was in a way the big issue for François Hollande.
Aventure.
Yes, misadventure.
Il avait raison de couper la route au groupe islamiste qui allait prendre Bamako, bien sûr.
He was right to try to prevent the Islamist groups from taking Bamako.
Mais comme il n'avait pas de but politique supérieur,
but he had no higher political goal.
Son seul objectif a été de rétablir un président élu.
His only goal was to restore an elected president.
C'était le président Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta.
President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta.
qui en fait a tout simplement restauré l'ordre ancien.
Who restored the old order without trying to make any reforms. Colonel Oga, may I request you to conclude because we are now out of time.
Je vais donc tracer plus vite. Macron ne connaît pas et ne comprend pas l'Afrique.
And President Macron does not really know or understand Africa.
Je prendrai simplement le dernier, les épisodes avec l'Algérie et le Rwanda.
And I will point to the latest episodes in foreign policy in Algeria and Rwanda.
Et puis le dernier sommet France-Afrique.
And the last summit between France and Africa.
Tenu à Montpellier le 8 octobre. Montpellier, le 8 octobre.
On 8 October last in Montpellier.
Qui est apparu comme une caricature de ce qu'il ne faut pas faire.
And this appeared as a real picture of what should not be done.
Donc pour moi, l'essentiel, et c'est ma conclusion,
my conclusion is,
il faut, en dépit de la détérioration actuelle de ces relations,
in spite of the actual deterioration of these relations,
elles ont des fondements historiques très importants.
They have very old historical foundations.
Avec un aspect, je dirais, profond et réel.
Yeah, this is all there is a very real and fundamental issue here.
Mais pour rétablir la confiance, qui est fondamentale.
And to restore confidence, to restore trust.
Il faut d'abord rétablir une véritable diplomatie qui ait une stratégie, qui ait un sens et qui ait une volonté.
There must be a new diplomacy with a strategy, with a meaning and a will.
Je vous remercie.
I thank you. Thank you very much, Colonel Oga.
I'm sorry because it's a big, long, because of translation, but I have a lot of things to do, to say. Thank you.
I think I will return now to our Russian friends. So for your information, Ambassador Berg has now joined us. So Mr. Kortunov, I guess now you would be introducing your speaker from your side, right? And then.
Yes, so it is definitely my pleasure to introduce Natalia Seizer, who is leading the Russian African Business Initiative, who is one of the leaders of the Russian civil society working with African partners, who has a lot of experience in many African countries, and who has both a lot of practical experience and theoretical research on the situation in Africa and the Russian attitude towards the African continent. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andre, and dear colleagues from France. Thank you so much for initiating and organizing together with RIAC this very interesting and I do hope a very perspective discussion. My name is Natalia Seizer. I'm the chair of the board of Africa Business Initiative Union. So as Andre has mentioned, we are focusing on Russia, Africa, and beyond relationships. Actually, initially, the initiative has been founded as a platform for helping Russian companies to enter the African continent from the economic perspective, but within the times, it showed that we are more a strategic think tank in terms of working with the African continent, and we are partnering also with RIAC, and we are doing different analysis. We are trying to compare and develop the strategy for Russia to work with the African continent, and we are organizing different events that might help to share the understanding between African countries and Russia and other countries as well, how we can structure, cooperate, or coordinate our efforts on the African continent. So I have been working with the African continent for more than 12 years already, and I do hope that I know some processes that are happening there. Of course, I'm not that type of the expert as, for example, honorable colleagues from your side have not been serving or working in Africa, but I do hope that some processes that are reflected at the moment within the current situation and current times are somehow familiar to me. So in this regard, I would like to draw your attention to the potential opportunities of, as Andrei said, coordination or cooperation between Russia, Europe, maybe France in particular, in Africa. The thing is, and you have mentioned it as well, you know, we are living in a completely different time, and the geopolitical landscape is changing rapidly. We're not talking only about Africa here, we're talking about the global world. Africa is turbulent. Africa is probably more turbulent than ever, and the growing tension and the danger of that is that nowadays Africa is no longer Africa 30 or 20 years ago. We have the continent of 1.6 billion people living there. The population, the young population, it's a young continent, the young population that is going to double by 2050. And it's a great challenge whether these young people are going to develop and create the new world order or African world order on the continent, or these young people will bring the idea of extremism, terrorism to the continent and to the other world. And that's a huge danger that I think all the actors who are interested in working or cooperating in Africa do not really, we do not really understand how much is the danger. So, and the influence of that might really affect the whole world, and Europe in particular, and Russia, whoever. So in this regard, I would think that of course, nowadays, within the pandemic, because of the pandemic, which is not yet over, also with the situation of global economic recession, the pure economic cooperation between the countries, between the actors in Africa, might probably be a little bit, uncomfortable, because every country is trying to realize their own ambitions. They're trying to save their own funds, and they're trying actually to solve the problems they are facing at the moment within this global economic recession. So economic field is more a field of competition than a field of cooperation. So, but nowadays, you have just mentioned the summit that has been held by President Macron in France. I'm not here, of course, to judge the policy of Mr. Macron, but I need to say that he has invited the civil society representatives. From my side, we have been organizing for the third year running the Russia-Africa Public Forum. We started in 2018. We did it on purpose because it was absolutely new format and an absolutely new event for Russia. And we were trying to focus on the issues that can really bring a lot of actors to cooperation in Africa and help Africa to develop, not to, be seized in conflicts, fire, terrorist attacks, and whatever. What matters now, I think, is the opportunity for interpersonal interaction and civil society development. The foreign policy situation of recent years has left serious impacts on all forms of international interaction. Cooperation and competition have acquired a completely different connotation, and the achievement of joint or any other goals is accompanied today by a number of factors aggravating the already fragile nature of international relations framework. So the mutual alienation, and I would say multi-layeredness, that are characteristic of relations between, at the moment, Russia and Europe as well, and the corresponding narrowing of contacts and aggravation of tone for some time seriously worsened the situation on all previously successful areas of cooperation. So in trade, industry, in healthcare, in agriculture, in science, and of course in entire foreign policy course. Nevertheless, it is interpersonal relation and the language of society today that are still one of the key and least conflicting tools for dialogue. Controversial and uncompromising positions, divergent views on the international arena, sanctions policy and rivalry in foreign markets do not add a positive touch to the relationships, and Russian-European relationships in particular. So how can a lasting reduction in tension be achieved, especially in situations where the interests of Russia and Europe intersect? So these might be similar positions on issues ensuring peace and security. For example, in the region of Middle East and North Africa, Libya. In trade, economic investment and technological policies in the countries of the African continent. So I think that there are some issues that are very important to become and to view as a platform for cooperation or coordination between Russia and Europe. We have migration, and I would actually add climatic migration. The climate policy, actually, in the ecological agenda is the #1 priority for the whole world. I know that it has been repeated now on different summits and forums, but we are still there. And I think that African continent, you, of course, as experts know much better than me, Africa is experiencing huge problems with climate change and with ecological situation in general. That means that Russia has ratified Paris Agreement, so European countries are there, and I know that Germany is going to follow a very strict and strong ecological and climate policy. So we can join our forces here to help African continent to somehow, come out of this huge, dangerous situation that are in there, and to work out or think about the potential efforts and tools and mechanisms, how we can do that together for the benefit of African countries, but together with African leaders. This is the platform where we're not going to compete, to my perception, to my opinion. This is the platform and the background where we can do all together for the sustainable development of the whole world. That has, that climate agenda is #1 priority, and it influences the whole world in general. The second thing, of course, is peace and security issues and peacekeeping operations and fight with terrorism. I need to say that there is still a misunderstanding or miscoordination between whether Russia and France, between Russia and Europe, in Africa. Everybody is following their own way. I think there are also the huge lack of information that does not add a positive touch to the whole situation. But I think, again, we are dealing with a continent, with a young continent that is like a powder keg, and it's going to explore anytime, not on the level of it exploring and burning at the moment, but much, much bigger. So I think if we are really sitting around one table and thinking about the potential policy, which is important. I would need to say and point out the word policy here. And I agree completely that probably we have the same situation. I think not only Russia, France, and others, at the moment, probably a very few or no country has a policy for Africa. There are probably some factors that are following that. The pandemic, the current changing geopolitical landscape, the changing situation of security in Africa, the rise in terrorism. I think that terrorists are viewing Africa as #2 or really now #1 platform for development. And I think it's not only my opinion. I think this is the opinion of the experts in that field. So I think because of that, everybody is a little bit losing the track in terms of how to structure the relationships. probably we can exclude China somehow, who are trying to follow and keep the consistency in working with the continent. I need to say that from my personal perspective, they had gone through three, at least, three periods of different approaches to work with Africa. But at least in any case, they're trying to be consistent as much as possible. I need to say that Turkey is showing their huge interest to the continent. And President Erdogan is going to have a big tour to Africa again. So a small country, which is going to be also to develop and structure very concrete relationships with Africa. So, but in any case, I think they are all as well in between, and they're trying to find the right approach in their strategy, what will definitely work for that. So also, again, healthcare, life science, we are all on the same, in the same camp. We are all here on the same situation. We need to help the developing countries, which are now, of course, losing their GDP, I mean, African continent, African countries, to help and coordinate forces here now to stop the pandemic, because Africa is behind. Africa is still going to go through the pandemic situation, which is happening now or has happened in Europe, in Russia, in States. So it's not yet over. And I think that that Africa might be the last to close, this pandemic window, if it closes at all. I mean, say, let's hope for better. So I think these are the things, and actually in general, the civil society coordination, the civil society and public coordination, the development of the instruments that can help and mutually benefit the development of mankind. I think if we really understand and find these solutions together, and if France and Russia are going to lead this opportunity, and Russia is not a bad partner here. Russia doesn't have a colonial past. So I think we might be really successful, and at least we will be able to completely reload the perception from African leaders and African countries towards the situation between Russia and European countries as well. This is a very personalized track, and this is very personal thing. When anybody is quarreling, the other one is suffering from that if he, she, or it depends on that. Africa is still depending. Africa is still depending on the donors. And if they understand that now France, Germany, Europe in general, I mean EU, and probably Russia and others, now they do not have any policy towards them, this power attack will definitely be explored. And it will definitely be leading itself completely different direction that we might be even guess. So I think it's a very serious issue, and I do hope that my thoughts will somehow be interesting for you to discuss also further. So, because I do hope that we are going to have these discussions as a serious in future. So thank you so much, colleagues, for your attention. So Andrei or Mr. Uso, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Il faudrait le connecter. Alors, on passe, je pense, c'est l'ambassadeur Berg qui va reprendre. Parce que, mais il faut les prévenir parce que, en principe, c'était Luongo qui devait venir. Oui, le problème, c'est qu'il faut vraiment le relancer. Parce que...
Should we proceed with Juliana?
Yes, we have to check with Dr. Luongo, who is in Rome. And let's see if he's just a second.
That was before.
Oui, non, parce que le problème, c'est que s'il n'est pas en ligne.
I'm not sure that I can see him on the screen, but.
Oui, donc on passe. Yes, I think we are just trying to make sure that the language comes online. But if you don't mind, sorry for the slight disruption, but since Ambassador Berg is now with us, perhaps we can proceed with Ambassador Berg, and Mr. Luongo will join us in the following session.
Okay.
Ambassador Berg, the floor is yours.
Спасибо. Извините, что я пришел поздно. Я заблуждался в Париже. Вот я отвык от Парижа и, конечно, взял неверный автобус и должен был ждать и идти пешком. Но это показывает, как трудно наше положение сейчас. Это просто, то мои русские друзья поняли эту ситуацию. Now I'm going to shift to the Shakespeare from Pushkin language. Unfortunately, we can't speak with the Chateaubriand language. That's for the next time. And because we are trying to protect the French language in Africa, and French language will be saved by Africa. We don't have to forget that. And that's one of the reasons of the French intervention, which is began. I just remember for the people here that the first summit, I was just entering the Foreign Service at that time. I was very young. That was convened by President Pompidou, the follower of Charles de Gaulle. The first summit was convened in '73, and all the countries were taking the lead or the same route as France. And now every country has a summit, of course, the Chinese, Russia in Sochi, 19 and so on, Portuguese, Japanese, and so on. And now Turkey is coming in the fray. I just listened to the very interesting intervention of Natalia Seizer. You know, I don't want to make polemic now, discussion. You say that's probably the most acute period of African history ever. That's probably your opinion with your experience. I think Africa had much severe condition before. Remember, in '75, 60,000 Cuban troops have been taken from Cuba by Russian Soviet boats, and they defeated, and that's where they depended 11 November '75 in Angola. And Angola is a big stake, second producer of oil, diamonds, agriculture, and so on. I was ambassador in Namibia and Botswana, and I followed very closely the first World War, RDC, where 5 African countries were involved, and that was a big thing. Though I've written a document on Sahel in Russia, probably Mr. Noé will be sent to you. Unfortunately, he was not able to send you to describe. In my opinion, the Sahel, of course, you know, it's 5 million kilometers. It's probably from 15 to 20% of the area, but no more, rule of thumb, 3 or 4% of the GDP. Of course, economics is not the main reason, but still that counts. Though we are speaking of a large, rarely underdeveloped, I don't speak of Nigeria, the giant, of course, and we're focused on this region for many reasons. And I will try very quickly to make, and my third, of course, remark, which is open, already an open door, things are changing very quickly. When I just arrived today, I received for the first time the TASS, and Vladimir Putin, the leader of the Russian nation, have just said, according to what I read, he said private military companies, and you know to which I refer, are not in the interest of Russia. And if they are intervening there, we will take some steps. Interesting. They are just searching for oil, mineral, and so on. And this, I think, because to take the conclusion of Natalia Seizer, you said we have to cooperate. This is exactly what I've said. You know, Senator Pushkov, a very good, he speaks very good French. He came in the Russian Institute in Cabroni 3 years ago, and I publicly said we have to work together, despite of Ukrainian, despite of, and you think there will be something in giving. Your conclusion, we say we have to work. I'm more reserved, pessimist, because, of course, of the present situation. And when I hear the President Putin reservation, I think we have something to hope to attend. Because I was in Russia attending the election. I was interviewed by many people. I even seen some people, former agent of the GRU, some academic, and I said, now, after the AUKUS, the kind of treason made by our Anglo-Saxon friends, we have to try to cooperate. Of course, France will not withdraw from NATO, though we have to cooperate. And one of the advice I give, don't put Wagner in Mali. This is something very touchy. If you put Wagner in Mali, that will disturb all the boat, and that will prohibit and thing. Though I'm reconciled. We will see. Though the problem that France, and I'm very quickly, I'm not going to repeat all. And I think in this attack, you know, Mr. Trump wanted to withdraw his troop from Niger. And there is a very big base in Agadez, north of Niger. And the French army, which is efficient, we boast to be the third or the fourth in the world. We are not going to compete. We are strong, but we are not. We're not competing with the United States, China, and Russia, of course. We are a medium big size power. And we have boasted to have destroyed many chiefs. Only 2 days ago, we have destroyed many jihadist chiefs. But we have recognized we have done that with the help of the American drones. Without that, without the intelligence. And 2 weeks ago, Antony Blinken, the very Francophone chief of the State Department, I think he has not reconciled France with AUKUS. It's a long term, but he's reaffirmed the commitment of United States. We are going to increase or not to withdraw. And this is something to alleviate French fears. That means all things are changing and so on. Though we have to take that in the pictures. Turkey, of course, China is not involved in military. The Russian, and it's normal that Russia has to come to Africa. And it's not new. You know, it's not new to remember that there is a statute of Pushkin in Addis Ababa. But what I have not time I'm not going to repeat the G5 Sahel, Barkhane, some people will think of that. The turning point, and this is things we can change in the coming weeks, days, or months. First element, we're entering, of course, in the electoral competition in France. And Macron, which is accused to be weak, can't withdraw like the humiliation of Kabul. And when Florence Parly, which I've met once or twice in my life, said, we are not going to withdraw, that remembers a minister of finance said, we are never going to devaluate the euro, the franc. When a minister of finance said that means he will devaluate. That I don't say that France said we are Kabul and Bamako as different. This is for public opinion. This is, of course, you have to take very, very carefully. But still, there is a problem. The problem is that France has said we are not going to negotiate with terrorists. And this is probably the most important point of our discussion and so on. And here, it's very evaluated. I have a paper which we probably you will receive. I'm not going to the details. Many countries, including Mali, Niger, are open. Mali has just opened 3 days before. The High Council for Islamic and so on discussion has commented the Himan Dako, the leader of the 5 June movement, to enter discussion because there was a separation, as you know, because external jihadists, Algerian, Syrian, and local one. And the government want to discuss. After all, America have discussed with the Taliban, and the Taliban were not recognized by Moscow. They were in Moscow 2 days before. Though we have to discuss with them. France, for the moment, is taking a kind of position, extremist position, and they put themselves in a corner because when you say we are never going to discuss, and 2 months you discuss, you show that you're not very stable and not very consistent. And this is the problem. The other thing, and that's also a point of discussion for us. Just today, what I have read, that in south of Chad, Chad in the north, and interesting, Chad, the French intervened in Chad in 1967. I remember the first officer killed in Chad was one of my friend, Russian origin. He was a Captain Voronin, a very big young man, and he was killed in Chad in 1968. That's mean French intervention in Africa goes very long. Well, it goes for the first time in 1964 with a coup d'etat in Gabon, but that's all history. But now turn to the point of fundamental one. Do we want that the Sharia, the Islamic law, will be implemented in this Sahel? For the moment, if I understand well the French position, we don't want that. That's the main intervention. Sorry, I said, it's not us, Paris, Brussels, Moscow, or ever to impose on this country the type of country or the time of political religious regime. That's internal affairs. We have been asked to intervene to stop the jihadists, but we're not here to change the regime. We wanted to reconstruct the states. That was a failure, like in Afghanistan. Now, if we are all in a turning point, what to do? Withdraw, we are diminishing, as you know, but is Paris, and I have no answer on that because it's evaluated, it's like the milk on the fire. How are we accepting the introduction on the Sharia, like in Chad, the discussion and so on? Our leaders, Macron, Le Drian, because Castex is out of the picture, France Paris, it's a very probably 10 or 15 people in France have to decide it. Unfortunately, the parliament is not involved. We are a very presidential republic where the president decides everything without discussion. And that's pity because it concerns us, not only on migration and so on, you very rightly said. Though this is what I wanted to say. I'm coming out of my papers because every day there is something new and it's open. And it's very good that we are able to discuss with you, to have your opinion to change our Francophile African, because I've been in Iris. There is, unfortunately, a kind of French bashing in Africa, especially Mali. Of course, everybody knows that the prime minister was 10 years in Moscow. He attended the telecommunication. I don't label him a populist, but still, he's a kind of third world. He represents, and according to my knowledge, he's not totally supported by the military junta. The military junta went on. No, that's political game. It's normal. It's life. Though, to conclude, I don't think for the present that there is a possibility for French-Russian cooperation in that field, because for that France has relied on its European partners, Tabuka and so on. Unfortunately, they are not very reluctant. Of course, if Estonia sends 30 soldiers in Sahel, that will not change the pictures. For the moment, it depends on Germany, but you know the German position. They have the green and so on, and they are not they're not pushing for military intervention. The American try not to buy, but to alleviate our fears. Though we are on the ground, which is changing every week. Let's see, let's discuss, let's exchange our point of view, write articles, and so on, and prepare. But probably a breakthrough will come. Will it come before the French election, after? We will have to see. As our British diplomacy, the wiser in the world, I say with Zuri, wait and see, but discuss. So, je parle 10 minutes, 10 minutes? Good.
I wonder if I might make a comment. First of all, thank you for your presentation. We really appreciate your candid approach, and also the importance of francophonie en Afrique. C'est très important pour tout le monde. But let me also say that I see one of the problems in the European approach is that every time, or quite often, when we raise these issues with our European counterparts, the standard reply to Russians is that basically you are always a part of the problem. You are never a part of the solution. That's why the best thing that you can do in Africa is to get out of Africa. Let Africa to us, to Europeans, to Americans. We will do the job. We know the region. We have history in relations with our former colonies, and you don't have anything to bring to the table. Only problems, only troubles, only conflicts. And I'm afraid that that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If Russia is not a stakeholder in Africa, or if it is not perceived as a stakeholder in Africa, there is a temptation to become a spoiler. If I allow myself to put it in a rather blunt and undiplomatic way. And I think that this is an issue that we have to address because I do believe that Russia does have certain comparative advantages, not just as a security provider, but also as a potential provider of continental commons. And definitely, if we increase the community of Russian stakeholders, if we make sure that these are not just people who get employed by military private companies, but these are people who are working in, let's say, education or public health or in communications or in other areas which Africa really needs, then probably we will come to some kind of a more natural partnership between Russia and its European neighbors, and especially between Russia and France, given the importance of French positions in large parts of the African continent. So my suggestion would be to look for these opportunities. We should not forget about challenges. We should not forget about differences of perceptions. But I would strongly encourage our discussion to focus on this positive side to the extent we can identify opportunities for parallel and arguably even joint actions. Thank you.
Right. No, I think you are right on that. Well, you know, I have some experience in the oil companies. I've worked for Total, and Total is working with Novatek in Russia. And now, well, let us be blunt. Diamonds, France is not strong. You have Alrosa and so on with De Beers. You worked together in Angola many years ago. Though materials, apart from nickel, New Caledonia, were not very strong. But oil and gas were already cooperating in Russia and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. Though you are right on that field, apart from the politics, apart from the security of the Sahel as such, there is a possibility to work, and we have to push that. For instance, Israel is looking for gas in Morocco. Algeria is very upset because now they are on conflicting terms. Though we still have to cooperate beyond Sahel. For instance, in Algeria and so on, we are competing to sell arms, but that's normal, it's normal life. But still we have ground, probably in the atomic field as also, because, well, that's also very competitive because EDF and Rosatom they have been working together many years ago. Probably they will find you have a lead, for instance, in the floating atomic station. And I've said that big countries like Niger will probably need that, and we can join because and so on. Though there is some niche, oil, atomic, and some other, probably I don't know. Well, though that's right, but that's go beyond the Sahel region. But it includes Sahel and include Africa, of course. But that will take time. For that, we need the sky. The political sky has to be better, which is unfortunately not the case when you see NATO and so on. But on the technical ground, we have to prepare that. And surely there is avenues, because we are not going to reach agreement in few months, but we have to prepare now to see. And the companies, they are already discussing on that. And that's you are right, is bring a much brighter pictures to the pessimistic view we could have on the very short term.
Vous avez raison, oui.
So, I'm sorry, am I on? No, so, Mr. Kortunov and Mrs. Bogdasarova, can we now proceed to the second session with, I think it would be Mrs. Professor Natalia Pishkunova.
I'm sorry, unfortunately, Natalia, she is not among us, and so we have to start maybe with Sergei Kostolyanets.
All right, so then let's go with Mr. Sergei Kostolyanets, Professor Sergei Kostolyanets now.
Or should someone introduce myself? Okay, dear colleagues, good afternoon, dear friends. I'm head of the Center for Social and Political Studies at the Institute for African Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences. I will speak about Islamic radicalization in Central Africa on the case of Cameroon. Not so much about great power politics, sorry. So Cameroon in recent years has recorded significant increases in terrorism-related deaths. The Republic is still considered a spillover country rather than an epicenter country for violent extremism. But for example, in terms of the accumulated economic costs of terrorism, in 2019, it ranked 4th in Africa, which indicates that this relatively large and regionally important Central African economy has already become an integral part of the ill-famed belt of instability that stretches from Mali to Somalia to Mozambique. In 2020, Cameroon found itself among the countries that in Africa that were hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic, both from a health and economic perspectives. Its real GDP contracted by 2.4%. So the socio-economic situation became even more conducive to radicalization of the population. Add to this an escalating armed insurgency in Western Anglophone regions, activities of Islamic State, West Africa province, of remnants of Boko Haram, and also the fact that Cameroon's president, Paul Biya, is now Africa's oldest head of state, second oldest in the world after Elizabeth II, who will celebrate 40 years in power next year, and he may be planning to pass his chair to his unpopular son, and in what is likely to be a troublesome transition. So the picture is not very promising. Now, if we go back to the topic of Islamic radicalization, we may find that in Cameroon, in recent decades, traditional Sufi Islam has been increasingly supplanted by the ideology of Wahhabism. Wahhabism is spreading particularly fast in the south of Cameroon, which was until recently inhabited predominantly by Christians or animists. South Cameroon's Wahhabis are mostly young people. Many of them were educated in Gulf countries or in Sudan. They communicate with each other in Arabic. They oppose control of the Fulani over the Muslim community. And the Fulani form a majority in the north of Cameroon and adhere mostly to Sufism. So largely due to the dynamic in the south, the share of Muslims in Cameroon has increased by almost 5% since the mid-2000s. So from 21 to 26%. And some sources, some experts even put the share of Muslims in Cameroon at 30% of the population now. So in the north, Muslims have traditionally been a majority, but terrorist attacks and particularly the harsh, indiscriminate government responses, they have led toward growing popularity of radical clerics in regions outside the north, including the country's capital Yaoundé and its economic powerhouse Douala. Disagreements between adherents to Sufism and Wahhabism have split Muslim communities and have already led to numerous violent clashes between these Islamic groups. The disagreements were not only theological, the conflict was also about economic and political influence in Muslim Ummah. But Sufism is gradually retreating everywhere, unable to offer a recipe for achieving justice and prospects for the youth within the existing corrupt authoritarian political system. Cameroon has a history of trying to prevent radicalization of the Muslim youth. Ahmadou Ahidjo, the first president of Cameroon, was a Fulani Muslim. He, throughout his tenure, maintained close contacts with Sufi imams in the north, provided them with economic and political support. He obstructed the Christianization of the north. He also tried to contain radicalization of Islam by placing, for example, traditional Muslim rulers under the control of local government bodies. The current head of state, Christian Southern Abiya, is remembered for his harsh suppression of dissent after the failed 1984 coup attempt, which was undertaken by Northerners, after which he lost much of the support of the northern elites. So in effect, Biya's administration for a long time continued to ignore both socioeconomic and military political problems of the north, including the terrorist activities of Boko Haram and other Islamists. The spread of Wahhabism initially started on university campuses somewhere in the early 1960s. But the movement, the movement was led by alumni of Quranic educational institutions and former pupils of Salafi centers in the Gulf and North Africa. The growth of the influence of Muslim fundamentalism was catalyzed by the 1979 revolution in Iran, which encouraged many Cameroonians to adopt Wahhabism. The factors that contributed to the spread of Islamic radicalism in Cameroon also included the uprising, the 1980 uprising in North Nigerian city of Kano, where Islamist Maitatsina sect started riots, but then under the pressure of Nigerian army retreated to Cameroon, and the founder of the sect was actually a Cameroonian. So currently about 10% of Cameroon's Muslims are Wahhabis. The dissemination of Wahhabism is actually supported and funded by or from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Egypt. For instance, Saudi Arabia builds Islamic educational institutions and mosques, disseminates the Quran in French, funds studies abroad. After their training in Islamic law and secular subjects at the Islamic Institute at University of Medina or Egypt's Al-Azhar University, young Cameroonians go back to their country and integrate into the local clergy. They gradually take control of Islamic institutions, school associations. Centers of Wahhabism have now appeared in most major cities of Cameroon. Although the Wahhabis still represent a minority of Muslims, the movement is growing. The rapid spread of Wahhabism in the south is explained by the fact that, unlike in the north, there are no traditional rulers in the south. There's no control over the activities of mosques. So Wahhabi proselytism is also promoted by free education in Wahhabi schools, as opposed to traditional schools in the Quran, which require tuition. The Wahhabi-led radicalization of Cameroonian youth makes them easy targets of terrorist recruitment. Over 20,000 Cameroonians had joined Boko Haram by 2017. Although a significant number of Cameroonian militants were recruited by force, many joined the Islamist for material reasons or did it voluntarily, inspired by calls for the defending of Islam, for the introduction of Sharia law, and so on. Until the mid-2010s, despite the growing violence in the north, Cameroon's authorities tolerated the Islamists in accordance with a kind of a non-aggression pact. So Biya viewed Boko Haram as a Nigerian problem. The country's northern regions he viewed as a faraway periphery, and only after an increase in the abductions of foreigners and government officials did Biya declare war on Boko Haram. And in one of its first operations, 2014, the Cameroonian army destroyed an alleged Boko Haram military training camp, arrested many boys 7 to 15 years of age, and But this turned out to be a Quranic school, not a militant camp, and nevertheless, the boys were kept in prison for a long time under terrible conditions. So this caused great local resentment and provoked even greater recruitment of Boko Haram. Cameroonian army also aroused discontent among the local population due to regular looting and extortion. Another problem is the growing number of refugees from Nigeria who are either deported or prosecuted or put in special camps in Cameroon, where they often lack food and basic necessities. So there are now 300,000 Nigerian refugees just in the north of Cameroon. And refugees camps and also prisons, they serve as natural places for Islamist indoctrination. The main socio-economic factors behind the growing influence of Islamists in the north of Cameroon are the limited presence of the state there, poor economic development, adverse climate change, demographic pressure, high unemployment, impoverishment of the local population. The high north, with its 4 million inhabitants, is actually the most populous and poorest region in Cameroon. 74% population lives under the below the poverty line, while the national average is about 40%. And most other socioeconomic indicators are also below the national average. Due to the hostilities between the army and the Islamists, over the past few years, 70% of farmers abandoned their farms, food prices rose, cross-border trade collapsed. Islamists have caused much of this, but their promises of justice, of equality, of economic prosperity in place of bad governance, corruption, mismanagement, they still fall on ready ears. In addition, Islamists often act as defenders of the local population against abuse by administrators or police. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they came to replace the state in certain areas. They provide population with healthcare, education, and security. And many traditional rulers and even the local government officials, they also collaborate with Islamists, guided either by economic interest or by ethnic solidarity or just out of fear. Besides, more and more new mosques are emerging in the north, in the government control areas, which compete with traditional prayer houses and attract young people. And new religious leaders, they promote jihad and establish contacts with international terrorist networks, with Islamic NGOs from Africa and the Middle East, which donate funds to Islamists under the guise of charity. So to sum up, it may be said that there's as much radicalization of Islam in Cameroon as Islamization of radicalism. Young people often already quite radical in their thinking. They're also most vulnerable to socio-economic inequality. They see no prospects of life improvements. So they turn to Islamism to try to correct injustices that are perpetuated around them, just as they would turn to communism or some other ideology decades back before that. So on the other hand, Islamic leaders may radicalize and turn to Islamism as a reaction to government repression. So in either case, Quranic schools, Wahhabi-led mosques, prisons, refugee camps, they are the most active incubators of Islamism. Most recent government measures to reduce poverty, inequality in the country, especially in its north, have been impeded by poor governance and arbitrary persecution of potential supporters of Islamism, including popular imams, as well as COVID-19 pandemic. So under the circumstances, any major political destabilization in Yaoundé, for example, in the course of a looming political transition, is likely to be used by Islamists as a window of opportunity to launch a wider insurrection. The government of Cameroon urgently needs a new, comprehensive strategy to win the hearts of the population, to improve public services, discipline the military, to curb foreign influences, to monitor preaching activities and educate imams locally, among other things. But Cameroon's ossified governing system, however, is unlikely to succeed in resolving such a complex problem, which may have dire repercussions for the entire region. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
I wonder, who is our next speaker? Should we proceed with I do not see Natalia Piskunova. Tatiana, do we have Natalia here?
I don't know the reason, but she didn't join us.
I see. I see. Well, then, I think that if I don't know whether we have any speakers left for the second session. If I guess that you are muted. I don't think that we hear you.
Andrei, if participants have questions, they can ask if we have time.
Yeah, we do have time, I guess.
And Mr. Campenton, you are muted.
Somehow we do not hear you.
Yeah, well, sorry. I think Dr. Longo, well, is not here. I can add some words to increase our discussion. I have just attended a lecture 1 week ago by Mr. Bontemps. He's a French representative to the Sahel. And he liked to stress that the French intervention is the cost, 70% military and 30% assistance and development. It's very difficult to maintain the equilibrium between the military intervention and, of course, the development, because, of course, that's the chicken and the egg. Without security, without order, you can't develop the countries. The dilemma of Mali, of course, that all the administration for the prefect and so on, they've withdrawn from the area. And it's very difficult for such a big country to develop itself without security, without the infrastructure, without the presence of the people and so on. And of course, though it's not only a problem, of course, it's a problem of development, how to create jobs, how to create the education and so on. And many things have, but billions of euros have been injected in the region. I don't think we have not seen the results so far. We have the Alliance for the Sahel. Now we have the coalition of the Sahel. When you read that, it's very, very good written. It's written by technocrats in the ministry, for instance, to strengthen the visibility of international engagement, to address the causes of the crisis, but we're already addressing the causes 30 years ago, to integrate approach regional level. That's very good, but that shows that how difficult it is to try to reach a solution. Though if the Russian side have some proposals to make, we will be very glad to hear them, because we have, of course, we have to create a kind of interesting country. For the moment, Europe as the lead, with the assistance, of course, United States, more security. Every country works on its side. China has its agenda, Turkey now. Mr. Erdogan was, of course, in Nigeria, Angola, and Togo. He wanted to, beyond its construction companies, to sell drones and so on. Is it possible now to create a kind of framework of international endeavor for this region? We have the MINUSCA, of course, we have the UN, but they are more peacekeeping. You have the World Bank, we have the IMF and so on. We have a lot of companies. Of course, we have the European Fund, we have probably it will be interesting to enlarge all these forums and to bring new participants. Though if Russia has some concrete proposal to make and to add, for instance, assistance development, either in terms of financing or technical assistance, in the field, we have to look at that. That's probably one of the direction we could take. But here also, it's very difficult because we have to coordinate, and one new partner, it's a coordination, it takes time and so on. But that's probably, it will leave, for instance, you have the first General Assembly of the Sahel Alliance just met many times, though probably we can invite it, make invitation like the Shanghai organization. You have members, you have invited and part of the dialogue. Though I will probably propose to create an enlarged dialogue for this region with open to some other our external powers, including Russia, probably Turkey. It's better to put them inside, not outside. Is Brazil interesting? For the moment, not. Brazil is interested in former Portuguese countries, like, of course, Angola, Mozambique, and so on. I don't want to mention Mozambique because, for instance, this is one of the largest projects of gas. Mozambique as the fifth reserve of gas. Total was leading partner in a project, 20 billion euros. And they have to declare force majeure. And the Rwandan army has intervened to try to crush in the Cabo Delgado in the north of Mozambique. I've been there twice before, of course, the movement of that. That shows Sahel, of course, this is the topic of today, but probably we have to enlarge this discussion on Africa. Is it an illusion? Is it possible? I just put the question to your discussion, to your appraisal.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I do hear you.
You can. Right. Sorry, I was trying to speak before. So I thank, of course, Dr. Castellanets and then the Ambassador Berg for their intervention. And I think we are beginning to see the possibilities that can be fruitfully explored with regard to consultation, exchange of information, and possibly at some point cooperation. Now, one thing which was mentioned was precisely the role of certain other countries, such as the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Emirates, Kuwait, and Turkey. And I believe in our next session, Mr. Hervé Juvin, who is a member of the European Parliament and the president of a foundation of the European Parliament, which is in fact party sponsoring this event, he would like, in fact, he told me that he would like to address the issue of Turkey, which is becoming rather critical in the West African and Central African region, because, and he will give some more facts and figures about this, but we know now that there are certain military or paramilitary elements which are being transported, courtesy Turkey, from one part of Eurasia to another, and sometimes to Africa as well, for certain strategic or tactical goals. So that will be, of course, a very interesting issue to take up. And I think Ambassador Berg is quite right in saying that it is better to bring Turkey into the discussion and essentially confront them with some of these issues, rather than let them act as an outside sort of, disruptor, which sometimes happens to be the case. So on that basis, I would like to ask, if you permit me, Colonel Jacques Hogarth to give us some of his own comments or views on what has just been said. Colonel Hogarth, would you care to make a few comments?
Is it okay now? Okay. Well, I appreciate very much the purpose of Ambassador Berg. I didn't have the chance to meet you before, Mr. Ambassador, and I'm pleased to hear you about. Well, I had a question from one of you about Mali, and I agree with the fact that you know, the links between Mali and France are so tiny, so ancient, that I don't believe that we can leave tomorrow Mali. I think it's rather more psychological warfare than reality. But I think if there's a Wagner involvement in Mali, it would be a psychological damage for the French government, according to the French-Russian relationship. And that would be, I think, very pity. We don't need such a development today between our countries. So I agree with Ambassador when he says that we have to develop a platform, a diplomacy. Diplomacy is rather more important than military operations, I think. Even for the solution of the crisis in Mali today, I think the problem is rather more political than military one in Mali, especially on security matters. You know, the cause is the reason why the crisis is so developing now in Mali are linked to the consequences of independence and the fact that a lot of populations, especially the northern populations, the Peul, the Songhai, the Tuareg, were left on the side and not involved in the modern Mali, the building up of the nation. So I think the effort could be linked between all diplomacy, the Russian one, the French one, the European one, to make Mali going to the right direction. It's not a conflict one direction. It's not a military solution which will make Mali getting out the crisis, I think.
Mr. Kortunov and Mr. Oga, the director of the French division of Africa, which I know because when I was ambassador in Namibia, he was just appearing, is a pupil of Polytechnique and now a very brilliant man. He had a problem because he was criticizing the French policy. He was kicked out of the ministry and then he's again here. Interesting man. And he was in Moscow the 8th of September to speak, though the dialogue is already, despite all the difficulty, is here. Of course, it's secret for the moment, but the channel is here. And we hope this channel will be maintained and even put on the higher level, because we have to discuss that. It's very important. And I to stress, you know, we have to go out of this confrontation, this competition, Wagner or not Wagner, what condition, what billion, you are looking for diamonds, you're looking for interest and so on. This is very good for the public opinion. It's like people catching on the ground, you won. Though I want to stress, we have to increase the dialogue on the scientific things we've done. On the economic side, I've already mentioned Total, Novotech, and so on, and probably other aspects from solar companies and so on. And then on the diplomatic and politic one, there is probably a lack of either will or understanding. And if there is an appeal from outside, well, it's difficult because we represent a very small, we are not going in the fore, we are not going in the society, but still, if there are some articles in the press, for instance, because the press is very national one. When you look, I read all the papers in Le Monde, Figaro, and other. Everybody is looking, what will do France? Oh, Wagner is a threat. Everybody look at its own small interest. Probably we have to enlarge that. And what we've done today, I don't want to conclude before the conclusion, is the first step in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me also add that, over last week, I had 2 meetings with the French ambassador to Russia, Pierre Lévy, who is a friend of mine, and he, of course, raised his concerns about the situation in Mali and the Russian engagement in Mali, not only the format of the engagement, but also style of the engagement. And also emphasize the importance of new ideas generated within independent think tanks and civil society to suggest some avenues of cooperation and coordination between Russia and France related to Sahel and to Africa at large. So I can only emphasize what you have just said. I think there is an appetite for new ideas on both sides, and the role of independent expert community should not be underestimated in generating these ideas. So I would just only encourage an opportunity of joint media appearances joint op-eds, reports, perspective Russia and France working together, but instead of confronting each other in conflict areas, South Africa. But I hope to give a floor to Denis Degtyaryov, who was waiting patiently for an opportunity to speak. Maybe it's the time for you to make a contribution.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to the exchange of opinions. My small presentation on Mali crisis, together with my colleagues, I will present next time, right, next Friday. And today, just a few reflections on some global issues, cooperation of Russia and France in Africa. To my mind, we should analyze the problem on 2 levels. The first level is the level of, I would say, of blocks, right? The level of what is called new bipolarity. And the second level is the level of great powers, which are Russia and France. If we speak about new bipolarity, I would say is rather macro-historic process. What we have now, right, is this competition between countries of collective West and collective East. Nowadays, in Russia, we more and more speak about collective East, right, with such countries like China, Russia, etc. We make a small research, right? If I may, just for 1 minute to show, right, the map. We analyze countries that are like it is here, right? Tends towards coalition with China, most likely to join coalition with China, tends towards coalition with USA, or most likely to join coalition, and we analyze it in total. And we can see is that in Africa, the situation is like this. We analyze in context of trade dependency, debt dependency, UN voting, technological dependency, which is 5G, and institutional power. If we speak about, new bipolarity, there is also one phenomena. the phenomena of decoupling. Decoupling, first of all, economic decoupling and technological decoupling, what we have already, right? Like introduction of clean network initiative with 5G, right? Which prohibit to European countries to use Chinese software, Chinese, hardware, software for 5G. But if we speak about Africa, I am convinced that decoupling in Africa will be in a violent form. What do I mean, right? It will be a kind of what we have in Central Africa, what we have in Mali, and further on in other countries. It's not just a micro process, it's macro historic process. So if decoupling happens in violent form, what does it mean? The control over country comes to collective non-West countries. If we speak about structural power of collective non-West, of course, as Professor Kartunov already told, Russia is provider of security mostly, while China is provider of economic goods, finance, etc. So there is some, specialization. And in this regard, if we speak in terms of new bipolarity, there are not so much points for cooperation between France and Russia. But if we speak about great powers, Russia and China, like great powers, I think that we have a lot of similar things, and in some way we are in a similar situation. There are some countries that are questioning our great power status, right? While, of course, France and Russia are interested to prove that we are still great powers, right? We are influential states. And I guess that anyway, there will be some way of violation of bloc discipline of new bipolarity between France and Russia, like it was during, previous bipolarity during Cold War. I graduated from GIMO University, right? And I remember very well Ivan Georgievich Tulin, right? Who was a very strong friend of France, right? And he sent me to study for 6 months or something to France, right? And I hope that this relationship between Russia and France as great powers is quite possible, and even in Africa. Thank you.
You should, yes. Now you should be able to hear me. Is it true? Yes.
Okay.
So I'm sorry because we have these little technical issues. Now, I wanted to thank Dr. Dekerev for his very interesting comments and very enlightening maps that he showed, and point out that, of course, going back to the 19th century, we know that France dreamed and actually acted to build a great African empire, which in a way was seen by the French rulers as a compensation for the loss of the European predominance or supremacy, which had been achieved in the 18th century and again under Napoleon. So this sort of compensatory mechanism of conquering Africa, and as Napoleon III said, to become a Muslim monarch, as it were, he said a king also in the Islamic world, that of course has undergone some massive transformations because of the very change in the state of the world. But we should remember that back around the 1950s, right after World War II, there was a proposal and a discussion about somehow keeping Africa within the wider European community that was being formed. And that was presented by a number of people, including, I must say at that time, my late father. And there was some real conversation about that. And this in some way tied to what de Gaulle said about, Europe from the west from the Atlantic to the Urals. So the idea of integrating the Russian state as well as the European community and Africa within a common development venture, within a common development sort of commonwealth. That is something which could indeed be explored in a new light, given the current circumstances. Mais là, je suis muet à nouveau, n'est-ce pas? Oui. Il faudrait peut-être que vous demandiez s'il y a d'autres questions.
Was there any question of this séance?
Là, on nous entend si on parle au micro. We were thinking that since we are approaching the end of the imparted time frame, perhaps if there are no other questions or comments, we could reconvene in 1 week with the speakers who haven't been able to join us this time and some others. So perhaps, I don't know who wants to give the final words. If anybody has any comment to make, this is the time.
I don't know. I see the hand of Mr. Gamov. I mean, are you with us?
Very good. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Sometimes one doesn't see the hands from here. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for both all you for your presenting your speech, and it was quite interesting to know what is going on in the Sahel region and also the role of France in this region. But could you please comment about the international legal status of private military companies? Are they prohibited? Because here in Russia, there's a special penal code for participating in military companies. It is classified as mercenary. What is about in France or maybe in the European Union?
It's well, there is a hello. There is a convention by the UN. I've checked it, prohibiting the intervention of mercenary in international conflicts, and this convention has been ratified by probably 40-60 countries. According to my knowledge, not Russia, but I may be wrong. I've seen that because when reading that, I've seen that there is a convention, but of course it's not applied. France, for instance, has been intervened by Bob Denard, even in the Congo, though everybody's saying we are not employing mercenary, and we are employing, but that was many years ago. Though this, of course, a touchy problem. Do we need? There is internal legislation, there is international. Do we have to make another step to strengthen the prohibition of the use of mercenary? It's a very touchy ground. I let you to address this issue by yourself. of course, you know, and even I read the Economist from London, and it's very interesting. You know, they are less Cartesian than us. They've said three arguments of the use of mercenary. First, it's much cheaper than traditional armies, because, you know, when somebody is dying, the compensation is much lower than the tradition. Then the states are not involved. And there is even a third argument, they are more flexible and so on. Though if the Economist, which is the newspaper of the so-called liberal elite in the world, is saying adventure in the mercenaries, it will be very difficult. It's like the fiscal paradise to eliminate them strongly. Though it's a very important question, and that needs, of course, a whole seminar on that. We live in an imperfect world. We have to address that. But of course, it's I'm not going to repeat the position of France on that and so on. And the most important, it's to create a professional army in Africa and to involve African Union and so on. And that's what we failed is that, despite all the efforts. I'm not going to repeat what has been done in Afghanistan. The Americans have spent $93 billion to create an army. It's 93 billion, can remember. It's bigger than the GNP of probably half of the member of the UN, 93 billion. It's a big amount of small coins. And we have not been able to do. We have put some billions of euros in that. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do that. Though send 1,000 people to protect a government is one thing, but to create professional army, pay them, recruit them, train them, it's very difficult. And I say that. I have been teaching in the Saint-Cyr, in the military school. I'm not going to whom, though I've been teaching for young military from outside France for 3 years. How is it difficult? And probably the Colonel Hogard will intervene in that. How it's difficult? Well, of course, you can create a colonel, but to take it's easier. But the whole army, to build them, to strengthen them, to pay them, and that's very difficult. But that's not my field, probably. And that's one of the main reasons of the failure in that region. I don't know if the Colonel Hogard can mean. Do we have another mean to recruit, to form, to build, and to maintain permanent army, able to fulfill the job of securing and not also destroying the people and so on? That's a big task. And if some new ideas come, that they will be welcome, surely.
You're muted. Comme d'habitude.
Do you have any question from today? No?
Somebody else had to raise their hand, but I don't know whether.
So thank you for your intervention and your analysis of Africa and the relation between Europe and Russia.
I think that we are coming to the end of our deliberations today. I would like to thank everybody for very open and very appropriate comments that we heard today. Definitely, it's the first meeting, so it was a little bit chaotic, and I'm sorry for that, but hopefully we'll be a little bit more organized next time. I personally learned a lot about specific situations in Sahel during this meeting. I hope that it was useful for all the participants of the meeting, and I think that this discussion suggests that there are many topics on which frank exchange of views between Russian and French and other European experts might be of significance, not just academically, but also in terms of applied foreign policy advice. I do hope that we will continue this discussion. I wonder whether anyone from the French side would like to add anything to that.
Colonel Hogar, would you like to say anything? Colonel Hogar, are you there? Je ne le vois pas. Si, il est là. Je ne sais pas si.
Well, thank you very much. I was very interested by this meeting, and I hope we can continue another time this conversation. Thank you.
So I think we can thank all the participants and the organizers, especially Dr. Kortunov and Mrs. Bogdasarova, who has done yeomanly work to put this together. And we do look forward to seeing you next Friday with the participants who haven't been included in today's session. Thank you.